Hello, everybody, and welcome to our live event for June. My name's Dave Solberg, and I am the managing editor of the RV Lifestyle and Repair Club. And I'm glad we got a lot of people have joined us. We just got done a little bit ago with doing our gold on connectivity for TV antennas, over the air, satellite streaming, etc. And I see we've got a pretty good list of people that are already on and some questions that have come in. In fact, we've got a few questions that came in on the 14th, the 17th, and the 18th. So they got in here early. And with that, I hope everybody's enjoying their summer. We just hit the hottest there last week with no rain, except we did 2 nights ago. We got about half an inch, but it's been up in the 90s, humid and blistering. So not real good camping weather, in my opinion, but some people really like it. So let's get to the first question here. It's Anthony sent this on the 14th, and he's got a 2020 DVR full house. My one roof air shuts off and has an air code of E7. I reset the breaker and the AC goes back on. What is the cause of the code? So I don't know off the top of my head what E7 means, but if you, I believe that DVR is using the Dometic air conditioners, but either way, it's either Dometic or Airxcel, which is Coleman. There are a few Furions, but I don't think in 2020 they were using that. So you should have an owner's manual in your packet specifically for that air conditioner. And my guess on that, an E7 could possibly be an over freezing situation. And it's either that or probably a voltage drop, the thing is that when you run your roof air conditioners, you're plugged into 120 volt. And so you should be able to look at that E7 code and tell you exactly what it is. And then we could go dig into a little further with that. But if it's a temperature issue, like a freezing or a frosting type of thing, then what that usually boils down to is somewhere you don't have enough, you've closed several of the ducts that are up in the roof, and you're not getting the airflow coming out, so you're getting a real blast, and it starts to get real cold because you got a thermistor that's up in the top of that, and it's saying, whoa, wait a minute, we're way too cold in there. So I see that happen quite a bit when you get those cold areas. Ken Fitzsimmons is from the UK, and Ken says that he has a 1990 6.2 Chevy RV. And so I'm assuming that you're on the P30 chassis. That would have been a 1990, unless you have the Class C, but I don't think that's the case. Either way, he wants to know what size belt to order for a Gulfstream Sunstream. And, that one, I could not pull that one out of my hat. I'm sorry to disappoint you with that, but you should be able to, go in and Gulfstream is been bought out a few times, so I think it'd be tough to find that. But that chassis should be a pretty, generic chassis that was used in a lot of RVs over the course of time. And if it's a P30, there's specifically P30 forums that you can go on to. So, you should be able to find somebody that has the same chassis for that. He asked, do I have someone in the UK? I don't. I used to know the 2 dealers that were up in north of London area, Oxford, and I can't remember the name of the other one. I visited them actually, but I know they're not still in business up there. But even if they were, the dealers can't work on the chassis portion of it, so you got to find a Chevy dealer. And one of the things you might be able to do is, I'm trying to think of who in the United States. Again, I would think your best bet would be to get into the forums and just look for a P30 chassis forum. If you are on the C body, on the Class C, then you would want to get into either I can't remember, E350 and E450 is the Ford version of that cab cutaway, and I'm not sure what the other one is, but if you can narrow it down a little more and get that model, and see if we can't find one of those forums that can help identify that. But that's a tough one. Starting off hard. Here we go. So Deborah says, we bought a beautiful 2001 Monaco Signature last November. Congratulations. That's a great unit. We have had the expected amount of repairs done, but the rig leans to the driver's side after between 24 or 48 hours of being parked. We have had the airbags checked and all the valves replaced. We found the previous owner struggled with the same problem since 2015 and spent quite a bit of money on it. I've seen posts on other forums about the same issue, but no answers. And today we saw a 2009 Monaco Dynasty at an RV dealership lot that was leaning. So the Monaco built their own chassis, and they have two airbags, one on each side of the of the axles, where Freightliner, Spartan, and those have one big airbag on the inside of it. And so there's a different thing. I think they called it a Dynamax chassis or something similar, but it's their proprietary chassis that they built. And the challenge that you have now is Monaco went out of business and then was bought and then bought again by Rev now. And you might be able to find somebody, a dealership, but I would say that most of the time what's happening is that owners are taking these into a dealership that is not quite familiar with that actual customized chassis. And so you've got not only the airbags, but you've got there's a suspension system that's part of that, and the axle. So really has to boil down to the shifting in some of those components. And I would have a tendency to say with those two airbags on the front, very notorious for those being deflated because nobody looks at them. They get kind of pancaked or sandwiched, and they start to get little splits in them. And it's probably just such a minute deal, but you should be able to isolate it by checking the pressure in that and just verifying that from 24 to 48 hours. If the pressure is low in that side of it, it's leaking. Even if you change the valves, there are so many other components in that go into that airbag that you should be able to identify it. It doesn't say here if they swapped out the bags, but I would say if I would give Rev a call, talk to somebody in their Monaco division, see if you can find somebody that's kind of weathered the storm. There are a few of those out there, but I don't have a cure-all for that other than getting it in and taking a look at it. So Ed says, hi, Dave, we have a 2022 Georgetown GT736D. I assume you recommend a surge protector for any RV. Yes, I do. Do you have a recommendation for a good 50 amp protector? I've been looking at them and they're very widely priced and function. Some are under $100, some up to $400. The highest priced ones have an emergency power off feature. Is that something you would recommend? I've been RVing since the 80s and never used one. Lucky, I guess. Now with the motorhome has high-end electronics and appliances, I don't want to press my luck. I believe that is. I do recommend one. Give me 1 second here to find it. Where did I put that? Oh, I took it out and used it in our last shoot, and I did not bring it back. That frustrates me. So the one that I recommend is called a Surge. There it is. Good. Oh, good. Clang. So this is a Surge Guard model, and it says TRC here, but it's now owned by Southwire. And the reason you see a difference in prices is you'll notice with this one, when you plug it in, it will go through and it will do diagnostics of the electrical system at your campground pedestal. It will look for the voltage. You want 120 volts. You want nothing less than 112 normally. You can get by a little less, but you don't want anything less than that. And then it will go through and it will tell you if it's wired correctly. If the neutral is loose in there, you don't want that because you can get a hot skin condition in it. And so what this will do, let's see if I can plug it in. 30 amps. One thing, never plug it in without shutting it off first. Come on, baby. There we go. All right. So the reason we want to shut it off is, first of all, I know this is a good outlet. I know it's wired correctly. Steve did it for me. I've checked it many, many times. You don't know if the campground, if it is, but the other thing is, if you plug in and unplug from a live outlet, it's going to give you a little bit of a spark, and it's going to start burning those contacts and points in there, which you don't want to do. So right now it's going through a little diagnostic, and it says delay 31 seconds. So I think it goes to about 2 minutes total in there. And what it's doing is just going through and making sure the wiring's good, the neutral, the positive, everything is fine in that. And why this one's going to cost you more, it's going to be about, this is a 30 amp. So you're going to get a 50 amp version of it. And what this has is the amount of joules that are in this. And that is the ability to take that shock, shut the unit down, and then come back. Each time you do that, you use so many of these joules that are in here. And some of them out in the market that are cheap, under $100, so they got a surge protector. You get a surge, it's done. You send it back in, pay a fee, and some of them, it's just done. You go buy a new one. So it just depends on how many people come into the campground. And you have a high shutoff and a low shutoff with this. So if I have over 132 volts, I believe it is, it will shut down and it will protect all my electronics, just like you said. And you've got all these LED or Bluetooth and all these monitoring systems that are out there, the slide room mechanisms, the controllers, all these computers, your computers, all this stuff in there that is very vulnerable to spikes in electricity, to surges, just, not only just high voltage, but then it also will do low voltage. So if it goes down below, I believe it's 105, it will also shut off. And it just kind of keeps waiting. Let's say it goes back up to 120, it will go through this delay section, and I just heard it click. And it just said, okay, so now I'm at L1 is 123 volts. So I know I'm really good there. And I show 0 amps. Of course, that's because I'm not plugged in. It's the other nice thing that this does too, is it will tell you your amp draw of your RV coming through here. So 50 amp, you don't really have to worry about that much. But when you start getting into a 30 amp system and you want to run 2 roof air conditioners, the microwave, you can't do that. So you have to kind of know where your energy management is, so you don't pop that out. So yeah, I would highly recommend, and again, this one is going to be able to reset itself. Once that goes to a certain point, pops it off, it will reset, and it will do that many, many times. That's where you see, those features plus the ability to reset itself is why you see that rise in the price. There are some other ones out there. The Watchdog is one that I've seen a lot of people use in the past. So I think they're a good idea, and I would recommend the Southwire version of the Surge Guard, and I think it's still, yep. So, and if you're concerned about it being stolen or sitting out in, most of these are weather protected, so you don't have to worry about it being outside if it rains, but it can be stolen. So there are some protected locks that you can put in, or you can buy that version as a standalone box, put it inside your service compartment, your electrical compartment, and lock the door. And plug it in and out of there. Those are a little more expensive. I've got Jose. I have a 2003 Four Winds Infinity with an Onan 5500 generator. The generator's not priming, no clicking, so I changed the fuel pump. I also changed the fuel filter, spark plugs, oil filter, air filter, carburetor. The generator will not start, so I disconnected the fuel line at the carburetor and tried priming and starting, but no fuel coming through. I have three four forced tank of gasoline. I was told by Ford there is no other inline fuel filter. Any guidance would be greatly appreciated. Well, okay, so what it sounds like is your generator is turning over. It is actually trying to start. You're saying it's not priming, no clicking. So I changed the fuel pump. So I don't know what clicking you're looking for, but the first thing that I would do is I would remove the fuel line from the carburetor and see if it is actually pumping. That'll identify is it prior to the carburetor or after the carburetor. And if it's not pumping fuel, then you've got your fuel pump. You have a fuel filter right there. So there is an inline. I mean, I call it inline, but it's right at the generator itself. Normally, there's not an inline one going from the fuel pump or fuel tank to that. And I'm not sure with an 03, and you didn't say what, you said Ford, so it is a 03, an F53 chassis. I'm not exactly sure where the fuel pump is in that. A lot of them are in the actual tank itself, but you said you changed the fuel filter, spark plugs, oil filter, air filter, carburetor. So I guess, but there's no fuel coming through it. So I think it has to be the fuel pump itself. So I changed the fuel pump. Okay, so that evidently that's not in the fuel tank. It must be a separate one. So I would say somewhere in your fuel tank itself, where this is drawing from, is that you're not getting it. Now, one of the other things that I would do, I would fill the tank up completely. You say you got 3/4 of a tank of gas. I don't trust the fuel gauges in some of these, and I don't trust the fact how it's pulling out of those, because I've had some that were above half and they didn't start. And once I filled the tank up, they would start. So, if you're not getting gas up to the carburetor like it says, then somewhere, and you've changed all that stuff through there, you should be able to track that line from your generator to your fuel tank. And then it's going to be a matter of dropping that fuel tank and just seeing what that delivery tube looks like. That could also be, gummed up with carbon, or not carbon, varnish. There's all kinds of stuff. Normally, if it doesn't start, I would say that, the problem, and one of the things you could do is take off that fuel line that's going to the fuel tank and drop it in a gallon of gas. Just get a gas can and fill it up, pop it in there. I've seen some people that had some problems with delivery issues, being able to pull it right from there with a short distance. And if it starts in there, it's something back at your tank. We have P says he's got a Winnebago Voyage 2005. 4 times as I'm driving, the rig slows down to a crawl and low engine power appears. Twice I have the gas pedal sensor replaced. Each time, if I tune the engine, turn the engine off and then on, everything is fine. The workhorse guy over the phone thought I had an electrical gremlin. The rig was in the truck repair place for a week. They could not find the problem. Any advice? That one, those are really tough to find. I have not heard of that happening. What I would recommend is to get a hold of Winnebago customer service, talk to their owner relations department, not customer service, owner relations department, and just find out if they have seen anything that happens like that. Chances are with a and you didn't say whether it was a 2005, it could still be a workhorse, or it could be a Ford workhorse. I'm sorry. The workhorse guy over the phone thought I have an electrical gremlin. I guess that is something that's a very difficult one to get without getting in there, putting the meters on it. Why does it start up and work fine when you turn it off and turn it on again? Is it an overheating situation? There are several good workhorse forums out there. That's probably some of the best source of information, is somebody that's spent $10,000 in 2 years finding those things And we can do a little bit of research on it and see if we can find it too. But I would highly recommend going to one of those forums and seeing if we can't find it. Sorry, I couldn't be much more help, but that's a very tough one when it's not something that you see pop up a lot of the times. Hugh says we have a 2023 Jayco fifth wheel, I'm assuming, 3121 RST. There are a few little oblong pieces of plastic stuck to the walls in the bedroom and the living area. What are they? Also, where is the on-off switch for the Winegard 360 system? Thanks for any information you can provide. So if you've got a Winegard 360, you probably don't have a switch. The switch usually turns on, we put ours in, no switch whatsoever. Power is coming from the coax cable, just like it did on your old, this is a Winegard prior to the Air 360. That's the Air 360 there. If you have a gateway that you're adding to it, then it probably would have a switch to it. But we put ours in directly into the top of it, no switch, and it worked fine. So once we turn the TV on and we get into a new area, it's already powered up, ready to go. And when you get on the TV screen, you just hit find channels on there. Now, some of them I have seen that come with a switch, and it all depends on the manufacturer. So if you got a 2023, I would say, look in your owner's manual. You should have a Winegard 360 owner's manual in that packet of 800 manuals that are in there, and look and see if your system actually has a switch or if it's just powered. Normally that switch is bringing 12-volt power in, but if you got it in your coax system already, you wouldn't have that. Otherwise, I would get a hold of Jayco and find out where they install them. And if they even did install it, did the dealer install it? So there could be several different issues. And what is the few little oblong pieces of plastic stuck to the walls in the bedroom and the living room area? Without seeing it, I've never seen anything like that. So I would say send a picture. We've got a technical side of this that you can go online, send a picture of what you're seeing in there, because I have no idea. So I'm trying to find a question I can answer. Oh, wait, I did answer that one. But these are some tough ones today. And it's, that's pretty common in the RV industry, is that there are so many variations of RVs and materials and manufacturers and, things that are going on that it's just, sometimes it takes a long time to hunt these things down and find the answer to them. So Ed says he has a 2022 Georgetown. I assume you recommend a surge guard. I think we did that earlier, right? Ed. Yep, because he posted at 3 o'clock and then again at 3:53. So that's the same one. So Ed, I think you're, that. We do have a download. Look at the top of this. The 50 best state parks today is the download. So make sure you go up and get those. And one of the things that's kind of interesting, we're seeing that the campground crowding situation is starting to ease up quite a bit. For the last couple of years, it's just been a nightmare out there. The minute the reservation system kicked in, they were done. And but that's because we were seeing so many people hitting the road. 600,000 RVs were sold in 2021. And, with the pandemic, kids weren't, they were homeschooling, staying home, not going to school. We were all working remote. And they said, wait, why don't we buy an RV rather than sitting, at home and doing this? So it has been easing up quite a bit. Okay, Eric says he got a 2013 Jayco Greyhawk DS31. Last time we watched our TVs, we were hooked up to a campsite cable. Now I'm trying to use our Batwing antenna, but our screen only shows cable channels. I tried everything using the remote to search for channels, but can't seem to access that option. Is there an antenna switch somewhere I need to flip? No. What you've got is when you hooked up to the cable system, your TV went in and recognized cable and went to the cable side of it. So what you need to do is go in to the menu of your rig and change the input setting. of that, because your cable would have come in through the coax in the service center more than likely, or on the side of the rig. You said you got a Greyhawk, so I'm not sure exactly where they put theirs, but what you need to do is to go in and change the input of your TV to TV antenna or over-the-air TV, and that way it'll change it from that coax so it's stuck on that old one. Tom says 2022 Primetime Crusader, $395 TV, 2020 Silverado 2500 HD. First trip chucking was too much. So I'm assuming you were so Primetime Crusader and a 2020 Silverado. Chucking probably meaning a little bit of the clunking, or even we call it porpoising up and down. It's kind of hard to tell exactly what you are experiencing, but you know, I got a couple questions here. 2022 Silverado 2500 HD, does it have is it a diesel? And I don't know how much your Primetime Crusader weighs. If it's a 39 footer, like it looks like it might be, you know, the first thing I would do is I would go weigh your truck and your trailer and find out, you know, where are you at, and then take a look at what your truck towing capacity is. You know, Silverados are notorious. I've got a 2016 Silverado. It's a 1500 four-wheel drive, but it says it can pull 11,000 pounds. But I pulled a 6,000 pound trailer, and I got about 6 miles a gallon out of that thing, and I was going 50 miles an hour up a fairly modest hill, and it was all over the road. I mean, that truck is made to look like a big heavy-duty truck, and so is that 2500. I know we've used a couple of them in the company I ran for about 10 years, that we had to go in and make some pretty good enhancements to that thing. So the first thing I would do is weigh that rig. Go to a cat scale at a Flying J, a Pilot, you know, just about any of your larger truck stops. $10, pull up, tell them that you're an RV, you're weighing this thing, and you're going to weigh it twice. And the first thing then I would do is I would put the front wheel of the truck on the first pad, the back driver's wheel on the second pad, and the tires of your RV on the third pad. So you have 3 different pads. So first of all, I want to know how much does that RV weigh? And second of all, I want to know how much weight is on the back end of that truck, because you're going to have a axle weight rating on that. And then you pull around, you come back, and you disconnect your trailer, and you weigh just the truck. Front wheels on the front pad, back wheels on the back pad. That's going to tell you how much weight is on the back end of that truck when you hook that trailer up, because you're also going to have a hitch weight that's back there. And you don't want too much. You want about 10 to 15%, but you don't want too little. So if you have less than that, you're going to start to get some sway normally. So that doesn't sound like the problem. But I want to know, what is your truck towing capacity, and take 10% off of that, because you don't want to be at max. And then I want to know how much weight is on the back end of that truck, because that's going to give me a lot of this when I go down the road. And I want to know how much that trailer weighs, and I'm going to take 10% off of my towing capacity. So if your 2500 says it can tow 14,000 pounds, you don't want to be at 14,000 pounds. You're going to have some problems. The other thing then I would look at, and I don't know if your Primetime Cruiser is a fifth wheel or a bumper pull. If it's a fifth wheel, then you know, I would definitely look at the weight on the back of that trailer. You probably want to add some helper springs or airbags to the back suspension of that, because even though it says it's an HD, I've never been happy with the stock components that have been on that. If it's a bumper pull, then you're definitely going to want to look at, again, the suspension on the back, the weight that's on that hitch, and then probably a weight distribution hitch, something like the Blue Ox or the Roadmaster, or the new Way Safe is one that is very good as well. So know your weights, find out where they're at, and then start calculating and seeing where you're at. Todd Guthrie says, hi, Dave. Hi, Todd. M. Musters says, rear passenger slide on my 2006 Tiffin Phaeton 40 QHD does not extend fully, lacks about 1 inch. How can I adjust to fully extend? I'm new to the RV world and have found your program extremely helpful. Thank you. Well, thanks, Mark. I need to know what slide room mechanism you have. So there's a variety of different ones out in the market. Lippert has bought most of them. There are adjustments on those and certain things you can do. And if it's you said the rear passenger side slide, so that would more than likely be like a wardrobe slide, which could be Swing Tech. If it's Swing Tech, it would have these little gears on the top and the bottom of the box itself. The motors are up in the top. And so those get out of sync. You're supposed to leave the switch on till the entire room comes in and the motor shuts off, which is usually 2 to 3 seconds after the room comes in fully. And if you don't do that, it gets out of sync, and then you start getting issues with it. The two motors being out of sync and then kind of being crooked and not extending fully. If it is a through the rail slide, like a rack and pinion slide, then you have adjustments on the bars underneath. And I would suggest going into our videos and just taking a look at the slide mechanisms, and you'll see where we showed how to adjust the slides in it. But if you can take a look at if it's a cable slide, then you might be getting too much slop in the cable itself, and there is an adjustment for that. We do have a video on that as well. So if you can identify the type of slide it is, then I would suggest going to lci1.com, which is the Lippert website, and going to their support and then you can identify the name of the slide, and they've got troubleshooting for that. And we can help you too if you send it in. But what you really need to do is to make sure you find out the mechanism. And then we can go further. Todd asks, is it possible to tighten the awning system so the wind doesn't blow them up? There's 3 different types of slides. There's A&E slide, that's the old Dometic. There's the Lippert slide, Solera, and then there's Carefree of Colorado. And there are some adjustments you can do to that. But what I have found a lot of people are starting to do is that when it's the awning system, I was thinking the slide room awnings coming out. So there are some tightening things you have to do. You need to be very, very careful with some of that stuff because the springs in those cylinders are really, really tight. And if you can't just start going in there and loosening stuff up. I've heard stories of people getting fingers ripped off and all kinds of stuff. So, the first thing I would recommend is identify the type of awning that you have. You should have a manual in your packet of stuff that will show you certain things. And most of them are going to refer you to a dealer to tighten those up. There is a way to go in and, adjust the tension in again, but that's not something I recommend the average person do. It can be very dangerous. We have a lot of rust on the rear grates by the engine on our 2022 Newmar Country Star, bought new. No exposure to winter, indoor climate controlled over winter, outdoor asphalt parking lot in the summer uncovered. What could be causing this? And normally what's causing rusting on anything on the rear grates or that type of stuff, it is, it's just a poor paint job. And you see it on chassis. You see it on, I got a friend that has a almost $1 million Ican Renegade, and the whole bottom side of it's so rusty, it's just making him sick. And he's going to spend, his is a 2016, and he did have it exposed to some winter stuff. But more what's going to cause this stuff is that they just do a top coat painting of it. They don't do a powder coating, a real good thorough powder coating. There's no protection on it whatsoever. You're going to get moisture no matter where you're at. If you're on the east or west coast, you're going to get some salt spray that comes just from the ocean, in the air itself. So you're going to get some of this deterioration. The thing that I would recommend to do is spray that whole underside with Corrosion X. Another product is called Fluid Film. Fluid Film's a little stinky, but Corrosion X, I sprayed this on the frame rail of my Silverado because I could see it was starting to get really rusty, just kind of surface rust on that stuff. And I sprayed it real heavily in there, and I just basically let it sit and wear it off itself, and then went back through a couple weeks later and went through the car wash and sprayed it off. And it's like, wow, I couldn't believe how much it took that rust off. So it kills rust and corrosion, and water resistance to that. That's probably something I would have done at the very beginning, had I known it was going to rust that fast. Verlin says, I have a 2019 Coachman Apex 19-foot single axle travel trailer and need to grease the wheel bearings. Since my trailer has the Dexter Easy Lube axle, the first option is to use the Easy Lube fitting to grease the wheel bearings. The second option is to remove the wheel and repack the wheel bearings. First option is easier. However, some mechanics do not recommend using the easy option because of the possibility of getting grease into the brake system. What do you recommend and why? So what Verlin has is the Easy Lube is a Dexter system. Lippert has one as well. And what that is on the spindle of your axle. So where your tire's at, you take that off, and you've got an axle there that's got a grease circ right in the front. And that spindle and that grease circ has a tube, just a hollow tube going to the back, or a drilled opening in the spindle itself. And it then has little ports on the back side. So when you hit that lube, it goes through the spindle, oozes out back through the bearings, and comes out the front. And the initial pitch for that thing was you never have to take the bearings off. You never have to grease them yourself. Because the old way of doing it is you take that whole assembly apart, you take the nut off the front of it, and you pull the bearings out, and you got inner and outer bearings, and you clean all those up. And then you have to go back through and repack the whole thing, and it's a messy job. You got to have a service area where you can clean that stuff with a solution and all the grease and everything. So people are saying, well, I'll just pop this in and it greases. Now, I don't believe it does anything to the brakes. I've seen several of these systems. I had them on 3 trailers that we ran 100,000 miles a year on every single one of the trailers. But I do recommend that you take the assembly apart and inspect the bearings once a year, because you can still get grit, you can still get heat that's going to, and scour those in there. Now, another product I see a lot of people are talking about is Bearing Buddies, and all that is a cap that goes over the old style bearing, and it just fills the cap with grease, and then it sprays all over the side. And people say, oh, I put Bearing Buddies in, and that's all I do is hit the zerk from the outside. Only thing Bearing Buddies is designed for is to fill the cap. So when you back a boat trailer into water, water doesn't get into your bearings. That's the only thing it does. It doesn't lube the bearings, it doesn't do anything else for it. And even Easy Lube, if you go on your owner's manual for that on the website, they recommend once a year to take that apart and to inspect them really well. And while you've got it apart, go ahead and clean them and re-lube them. You can re-lube them the same way. You place them back in. But they do recommend going in and checking it once a year. So Eric said, had a Norcold fridge hinge break. Will the reinforcement hinge work in a way that I won't have to buy a whole new door? Or will I have to get a new door and reinforcement kit? So it's hard to tell. I'm not familiar with what the reinforcement kit is, but I would imagine that if the hinge broke, that reinforcement kit is all that's probably doing is trying to support the weight of that unit. I would say that you probably would be able to get a replacement hinge, or maybe just the frame rather than an entire new door. I have put a hinge on a new frame on an older Norcold that had the hinges in it and didn't have to replace the entire door. So I would give Norcold a call, get on their customer service side of it, and just see if you should do that, because I don't think the reinforcement kit is going to help with a broken hinge. because that won't have any, pivot point in it. What's the best place to put the jack under my 2015 Forest River Cherokee 27 DBH to change out the tires? So there's two locations that you want to be very careful about it. We just did a video that'll be posted here in a little bit on the Salem that we had out there. And, one spot, a lot of manufacturers have a point on the chassis. You will have a good hard frame all the way around, and you can literally go up and see where that, that solid bar is at to be able to pull that up. The other spot that you can go on to is underneath, and most axle manufacturers don't recommend going on the axle portion itself, but if you go on the on the axle connector, because you could bend that connector plate, but you can go on the axle itself. That all depends on the weight of the trailer, the axles, and the jack you have too, I guess. But there should be a point on there, and most manufacturers have a recommended spot that you can go and place that on. You want to find a good, solid chassis point to be able to hook that on there. Otherwise, you're going to start tearing stuff up. So Jose said I did disconnect the fuel line, and you're still not getting fuel. If that's the case, then it's somewhere in the delivery, probably in the tank itself. We are putting all new tires on, but need to have the new switch to the new tire. We're putting all new tires on but need to have the new switch to the new tires. Is it possible to take all 4 off at once and take them in to put them on the rim? Okay, that's Margaret who wanted to know where to change it up. So what I would recommend, she wants to take all the tires off at the same time to take them in and get new tires put on to them. And I guess my question is if you bought tires from someplace, why aren't they putting them on? Most of the time buying the tires also covers getting them mounted and balanced, putting in there. Then they can do one side at one time and then switch to do the other side the other time. If you bought them at a discount store, first of all, I don't recommend buying them at discount stores, but then what I would recommend doing is getting a really good set of jack stands, and just making sure that they can hold the weight that your trailer is going to have in the 4 corners, and find that chassis rail on those 4 corners to be able to bring it up, set them onto that, and put it in all 4 corners. But be very, very careful. And one of the tips is when you're taking off or putting on a tire, always put your hands on the sides, not underneath, but on the sides at like 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock. And that way, if it does drop, the tire hits here and your fingers aren't underneath it. 2008 Safari Class A gas, 32-foot F53 Ford chassis. When driving at highway speeds, every joint seal on the highway causes the motorhome to bounce up enough to throw a cup off the dash. Is this normal for a Class A? I would say it's not normal. It all depends on the highway itself. So what you're getting, you're saying it's bouncing enough, so you're getting what we call dolphin or porpoising in there. On an F53, what I would recommend is go to Roadmaster and take a look at a couple of their products that are designed specifically for that, just to give you a little bit of a smoother ride. The other thing I would do is check your tires and just make sure you got proper inflation. And the only way you know proper inflation for your Safari is to weigh the coach, find out how much weight is on the individual tires, go to rvsafety.com and look up their tire chart and go to whatever tire you've got. Originally, I'm sure they were Michelin, and whatever they are now, because they're 2008, so you're 15 years old. So the tires should not be on there from original. But find the tire chart, find the model tire, what weight is on it, dual or single application, and that's the weight that should be on it. Not what's on the tire. That is maximum pressure at maximum weight. And if you're not at, with a 32-footer with an F53, if you're not at 22,000 pounds, and you put on what's on the side of that tire, whether it's 80 or 100, whatever, you have too much weight and it is going to go like this. So get the proper tire pressure, weigh your coach, and then take a look at Roadmaster. So we have Kay says she has a 2015 Montana. All of a sudden the door will not close without slamming. Looks as though the top hinge is bent. What would cause this? The trailer is level. There's a couple things that will cause this. So your entrance door is not aligning properly. And you got to remember that is a very kind of thin piece of aluminum framework that's on there, and the hinge, a pretty heavy door, and you're going down the road getting a lot of road vibrations, and you're opening that door, and if it's slamming a little bit one way or another, that frame can bend a little bit, that hinge can bend. Heat changes. I've got a Salem out here that was remodeled on our website. George did it, and the door worked fine until it got up to about 90 degrees here just recently. Now all of a sudden the door doesn't fit because it's going to expand and contract, and we didn't move it anywhere. But we're going to get some expansion and contraction with heat changes in that thing. So, there's a variety of things that could cause it. What I would do to fix it is to, first of all, find out, make sure the door is completely square, meaning flush. Did the door warp at all, top to bottom? Because you've got a frame around the door and you got a frame around the opening, both of those, and the hinges. And if that's square and just the hinge is bent a little bit, then there's a couple things that you can do. The old school method, we used to take a 2x4 and put on the inside. If the door was warped at all, we'd put the 2x4 and push up at the top and push at the bottom so it would bend it back flush. Same thing if it was on the bottom. Another thing you could do is then take the 2x4, if it's the top hinge, and just try to pry it. Otherwise, you take the hinge off and you put it in a vise and you tweak it a little more professionally. But that's how we do it. Margaret says, how does the black tank flush feature work? Is there a switch, or does it work automatically when you empty the black tank? So what she's talking about, she has a black tank flush valve, and what that is a valve that I'm going to get it. This is it right here. Take the top off of it, maybe. Wow. There we go. Okay, so I just installed this on, a typical Tupperware type program to kind of show, first of all, the monitor panels are right here. And this is a Blackwater flush valve. So what it does is I hook a garden hose to this side of it, turn the water on, and it is going to spray by spinning this and just clean the whole inside of this tank. And what that's designed to do is to clean these monitor probes that you see right here. So there's a couple different models. This one happens to be the Cyclone, I believe it is, but it works automatically. That's where the lid was. So, and there's a couple, like I said, there's a couple different models, but there's also a couple of ways that they're mounted. Now this one, some of them are directly on the tank itself. And so when you hook the garden hose up to it and you turn it on, it will splash. So it's not an automatic thing when you dump your tanks. You have to hook a hose to that valve to make it, supply water to it, pressurized water from a city fill or a city, supply to spin that and clean that whole area in there. Now, some of them like trailers, and you said, I can't remember what model you have, but it doesn't matter. But if your Blackwater tank is not right up on the side of the sidewall and accessible for you, and it's set inland a little bit, then you're going to have a valve that's in your service compartment that you hook to, but you're going to have a hose then that goes to that flush valve in there. So once you turn the water on, it should automatically just take off and go. So there's no switch to it on any of them that I know, because you've got to have pressurized water more than what you would get out of a typical water pump. It's going to come from a city source. Gerald says, solar panel question. How do I know what the panel is connected to? I drained 2 batteries thinking it would keep them charged. So there's a lot more to this question that needs to be provided. First of all, what size panel do you have? If it's just a standard solar panel that's up on the top that came with the unit, most likely it is just a maintenance panel that's designed to keep the batteries topped off when it's sitting at the dealer lot or in storage, because even just something as simple as an LP leak detector will drain those batteries in 2 to 3 days sometimes. And so a lot of the companies put just a real low wattage maintenance panel on the top. It will not keep your batteries completely charged. So that's the first thing, is what size panels do you have on the top of them? And then the second thing is what batteries do you have? If they're flooded lead acid batteries and they're group 24s, how old are they? If they are sulfated, they're gonna get a top charge on them, and they're just gonna drain immediately. And so those are the questions that the information you got to find out. Size of those panels. Does it have a charge controller? If it does, you should be able to see what you're getting for a charge coming down there. Are you getting? And the thing with solar panels is if you don't have a high quality solar panel on there, you get about 3 hours of charge when the sun gets right about this angle, rather than this whole morning is wasted here and this whole afternoon is wasted here. And then if you get clouds and you're underneath the tree, you get nothing. So there's a lot of things, a lot of factors to go into it. Pat again, the end cap on my Winnebago Voyage 205 has developed hairline cracks. Can they be sealed? And if so, what would I use? So I think the Voyage, the end cap, so on the back, so you have a fiberglass cap on the back side of it that typically is going to have the fiberglass either, and I don't, in 2005, I think they're still manufacturing that in Hampton, and they were using a chop gun process. So they've got this mold, and the first thing they do is they put a gel coat glossy outer finish, and then they start putting in the fiberglass with the inherent colors into that. And I would imagine what you're getting is probably UV degradation. You just get the sun starts to bake on that. It deteriorates, the temperature changes, so you get some hairline cracks. So most of the time that's going to be in that clear gel coat on the outside of it. So what I would recommend is it's probably not something you're going to be able to do yourself. If you get a body shop that does some fiberglass work, they should be very familiar with how to address that small little hairline cracks in it. I don't think it's a structural integrity issue, but it's something you definitely want to get addressed as soon as possible, so it just doesn't get any worse. And also it's going to start looking really bad eventually. So all you're trying to do is just almost do like a body putty, but it's a fiberglass resin that's the gel coat on that end piece. So where are we at? We got 6 minutes left. So he wants to know, what are you going to say about the awnings over the slide outs? Nothing. No. So a lot of times what happens, those awning on slide outs, they start to stretch, they start to get, bouncy and wobbly, and people don't really, like that, the noise, and eventually it might even tear that awning. So there's a couple different things that you can do. We've seen where you take swim noodles and take 3 of them, build them in a pyramid and slide it underneath. So it gives you it makes that a little more taut, and it doesn't have a way to flap. The best thing that I've seen is where you use either a real long bungee cord. You can go to home improvement stores. Ace Hardware, I see, has where you can buy bulk bungee rope and then put a hook on the end of it and just run it over the top, down the sides, and you can put either eyelets on the sides of that, or I've seen where people will get a one of those ratchet straps like you would use to hold a tarp down or something in the back of a truck, and put the ratchet strap all the way around and run it to 2 stakes on the bottom. So what you're doing is you're pulling that awning down and you're pulling it right towards the end. So it's still going to get the water runoff that you want, but it will tighten that up, just by pulling that fabric down on the top of it. Tom says, 5th wheel companion hitch, Lippert, all metal pin box, looking to switch. Do you like MORryde or FlexAir? I personally like MORryde. They've been in the business for years and years and years. The FlexAir, I haven't heard anything bad about it, but I'm just more familiar with the MORryde and all their products. And I think they have a track record. They got great customer service. They got people out on the road. They're at every major show with a service tech group there. So I really like them. Hugh says, also, do you have any knowledge about Furrion on-demand water heaters, such as when they will come out with a bug guards for the vents? We just did a video, and I don't know if, no, that was not Furrion. Sorry, that was Truma. So the Furrion, I did kind of get a little tutorial on that. I haven't dug into it too much yet, but they've got some really good a good website with some videos on their website. I do not know about bug guard vents for those. Normally, you don't see the manufacturer come out with that. You see somebody as an aftermarket finds a niche and puts a product. That's at least what I've seen in the older ones from Suburban. Then what happens is Suburban starts offering them as a aftermarket option. But I'm not familiar with that, other than I do know that the Furrion product, when I got a little tutorial at the Hershey show, seemed like to be a very good product. The materials, the workmanship was good. The challenge with on-demand water heaters is that you really have to be able to keep up with the rigors of bouncing down the road, temperature changes, and then the big thing is you're usually running hard water through them. So most of those have gone through those obstacles and they last well enough. Mark says it's a rack slide. So it's a rack and pinion slide, meaning you got gears that push it out. You should have adjustment bars, and on the very end of it there is a kind of an L-shaped bracket that you should be able to bring it in or take it out a little bit. So go online. I think Steve actually did the video on a 5th wheel toy hauler. It's been a few years ago since we did that, but there is an adjustment on those. Anna helpfully says, Google says E7 code is not having a 120 volt electrical. Okay, thanks, Eva. I appreciate that. So we were talking earlier about that AC and the 120 volts. So I would imagine what's happening with that system is you're getting a fluctuation in that. And so what I would recommend is to get yourself a meter. And it's really easy to use if you can find it. Is that the one? There it is. Yes. So I got this at Home Depot, and this is a Klein tool, and I believe I can just test it right here. Okay. All right, so I plug this in, and I know you guys can't see this real well, but I would plug this in to an outlet inside your rig and just let it sit there all the time. First of all, it tells you that it is wired correctly. There's no faults in it. There's no neutral. The next thing it's going to tell you is the 121 volts VAC, and that is correct. And so what could be happening is other units come into the campground source, the big boys, all the air conditioners start to kick in. If this drops down into 115, 114, your air conditioner starts to cycle and tries to go in, it's going to say, uh-oh, not enough 120 volt. That I see quite a bit. So check that. One of the things then I would recommend to do if you're seeing that is put a soft start RV um, condenser coil on that air conditioner. We sell them through the store. I think you can get a discount of them, but they will reduce that ramp up that you see on when the air conditioner initially takes off and starts to go. So with that, we're past our time. Appreciate all the questions coming in. I know we've got a couple more that have come up here. I'll try to get back in and answer those on the site here, and or maybe bring them up next month. So with that, I appreciate everybody coming out. Have a great summer. Try to stay cool and